In a quiet African village surrounded by tall trees and dusty paths, there lived a brave young girl named Zola. The village was small, with clay huts, colorful clothes hanging outside, and the warm sound of children laughing as they played in the sunlight. Life in the village was simple and peaceful. Every morning, Zola would wake up early to help her mother fetch water from the river and gather firewood from the nearby forest. Zola was known in the village for her kind heart and fearless spirit. While many children were afraid to walk alone through the narrow paths near the forest, Zola never hesitated. She loved exploring the beauty of nature, watching birds fly across the bright African sky, and listening to the wind whisper through the trees. One afternoon, as the golden sun began to set, Zola was walking back home with a small basket of firewood. The dusty road was quiet, and the long shadows of the trees stretched across the ground. As she walked, she suddenly noticed something strange. A shadow was following her. At first, Zola thought it was just her own shadow created by the setting sun. But after a few steps, she stopped walking. The shadow behind her moved again, even though she was standing still. Her heart began to beat faster. Zola slowly turned around, looking carefully at the empty road behind her. There was no one there. No person. No animal. Only the quiet village path and the whispering wind. Yet somehow, the shadow was still there. From that day forward, wherever Zola went, through the village market, along the river, or near the forest, the mysterious shadow followed her silently, as if it was watching her every move. And deep inside, Zola began to feel that this shadow was not ordinary at all. First, Zola tried to ignore the strange shadow that followed her. She told herself it was just her imagination. After all, in the evening the sun often created long shadows on the dusty roads of the village. But deep in her heart, she knew something was not right. The next morning, Zola woke up early as usual. The bright African sun was already rising above the tall trees, and the village was slowly coming to life. Women were preparing food, children were running and laughing, and the sound of birds filled the warm air. Zola picked up her clay water pot and started walking toward the river. The path was familiar and peaceful, but as she walked, she felt the same strange feeling again. She looked down at the ground. There it was, the shadow. It moved beside her, stretching across the dusty path. But something about it was wrong. When Zola stopped walking, the shadow moved a little longer before stopping too. Zola's heart skipped a beat. She slowly raised her hand into the air to test something. Her own shadow copied her movement perfectly, but the other shadow reacted a moment later, almost like someone was controlling it from far away. Now she was certain. This was not her shadow. Trying to stay calm, Zola continued walking toward the river, but she kept watching the ground carefully. The mysterious shadow followed every step she took, quietly and patiently. Later that day, while walking through the busy village market, Zola noticed something even stranger. The shadow appeared again, even when the sun was almost directly above her. That should have been impossible. Shadows normally shrink under the bright midday sun, but this one remained clear and dark. At that moment, Zola realized something that made a chill run down her spine. This shadow was not a normal shadow at all. It was something mysterious, and it was watching her. The days passed. Zola could no longer keep the strange shadow a secret. Wherever she went, it followed her quietly. At first, only she noticed it, but soon the people in the village began to see it too. One afternoon, Zola was walking through the busy village market. Women were selling fruits and vegetables. Children were playing near the small huts, and the air was filled with the sounds of laughter and conversation. But suddenly, a young boy stopped playing and pointed toward the ground near Zola. "Look," he shouted. People turned to see what he was pointing at. There, on the dusty ground, was the strange shadow. It moved behind Zola in a way that didn't look natural at all. Even when she stood still, the shadow seemed to shift slightly, as if it had a life of its own. The villagers began whispering to each other. Some people stepped back in fear. Others stared with wide eyes, unsure of what they were seeing. An old woman slowly shook her head and whispered that it looked like something dark was following the girl. Soon the rumors spread across the entire village. Some people believed the shadow was a bad sign. Others thought it might be a strange spirit. A few villagers even started avoiding Zola completely, afraid that the mysterious shadow could bring trouble to their homes. Zola felt sad and confused. She had always been kind to everyone in the village, but now people looked at her with fear instead of friendship. That evening, as the sun slowly disappeared behind the tall trees, Zola sat quietly outside her family's small clay hut. The air was calm, but the strange shadow was still there beside her. Watching, following, waiting. Zola looked at it carefully and whispered to herself, "What are you? And why are you following me?" The fear in the village continued to grow, and Zola could feel the distance between herself and the people she had known all her life. Children who once played with her now stayed away, and some villagers whispered whenever she walked past them. The mysterious shadow had turned her peaceful life into a puzzle no one could understand. One evening, Zola decided she could not live with this mystery any longer. She remembered the oldest and wisest man in the village, Baba Kofi. People believed he understood many things about nature, spirits, and the hidden secrets of the world. As the sun began to set and the sky turned golden and orange, Zola walked slowly toward Baba Kofi's small hut at the edge of the village. Tall trees surrounded the area, and the wind gently moved through the leaves, creating a quiet and mysterious atmosphere. When she arrived, Baba Kofi was sitting outside his hut beside a small fire. His face was calm and thoughtful, as if he had already sensed why she had come. Zola greeted him respectfully and sat down near the fire. For a moment, she stayed silent, gathering the courage to speak. Then she explained everything: the strange shadow that followed her everywhere, the way it moved differently, and how the villagers had become afraid of her. Baba Kofi listened carefully without interrupting. His eyes slowly moved toward the ground where the shadow stretched beside Zola. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he took a deep breath and spoke in a quiet but serious voice. "This is not an ordinary shadow," he said. Zola felt a chill run through her body. Baba Kofi continued, "Some shadows are not created by the sun. Sometimes, they are sent by people who hide their power in darkness." Zola's heart began to race. If someone had truly sent this shadow, then the mystery was far more dangerous than she had imagined. Zola sat silently beside the small fire, listening carefully to Baba Kofi's words. The night had grown darker, and the soft glow of the flames danced across the ground. The mysterious shadow was still there beside her, stretching across the dusty earth as if it were listening too. Who would send something like this? Zola asked nervously. Baba Kofi slowly looked toward the tall trees surrounding the village. His expression was serious, as though he was thinking about something very old and dangerous. Long ago, he began, people in distant places learned how to control shadows using dark magic. A shadow can be used to watch someone, follow them, and sometimes even bring fear into their life. Zola's heart pounded harder with every word. "You mean someone is watching me?" she asked quietly. Baba Kofi nodded slowly. "Yes," he replied. "This shadow did not appear by accident. Someone, somewhere, is controlling it." The fire crackled softly as the wind passed through the trees. Zola felt a cold shiver run through her body. She had always believed the village was a safe and peaceful place, but now it felt as if an unseen pair of eyes was always watching her. "But why me?" she asked, her voice full of confusion. Baba Kofi looked at her thoughtfully. "Sometimes people become jealous of those who are brave, kind, or different," he said. "A jealous heart can create dark intentions." Zola stared at the shadow beside her. For the first time, she realized that it was not just something strange, it was a message. Someone had chosen her. Someone had sent this shadow to follow her. And somewhere far away, that person was quietly controlling it, waiting and watching for something to happen. Remembered something Baba Kofi had told her before she left. "Some secrets hide far from the village," he had said. "Sometimes the answers live deep in the forest or inside the forgotten ruins beyond the hills." Zola decided that was where she would start. The path leading away from the village was narrow and dusty, surrounded by tall grass and thick trees. Birds flew above her, and the sunlight slowly filtered through the leaves. As she walked deeper into the forest, the air became quieter and more mysterious. Yet the shadow never left her side. It moved along the ground just behind her feet, following every step she took. Hours passed as Zola continued walking through the forest paths. Finally, she reached the edge of an ancient place that few villagers dared to visit. Old stone ruins, broken walls covered with vines, and silent structures left behind by time. Zola looked around carefully. Somewhere here, she felt certain, the truth about the shadow was waiting to be discovered. Zola carefully stepped through the ancient ruins, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and courage. Broken stone walls rose around her, covered in thick green vines, and the wind whispered secrets of long-forgotten times. Every step she took echoed through the empty structures, making the place feel alive in a strange, mysterious way. The shadow remained close, stretching and moving strangely across the cracked ground, as if sensing her thoughts. Zola had begun to understand that this was no ordinary shadow. It was clever, patient, and somehow connected to someone far away. Hours passed as she explored the ruins. She climbed over fallen stones, peeked into dark corners, and followed narrow paths lined with moss. Finally, near the center of the ruins, she noticed something unusual: footprints in the dust that did not belong to any person she had ever seen. They were small, precise, and seemed to lead toward a hidden chamber inside one of the broken walls. Zola approached carefully, holding her breath. The shadow moved silently beside her, almost guiding her forward. She pushed aside a large stone slab and entered the chamber. The air was cool and still, carrying a faint scent of herbs and smoke. Inside, she found the source of the shadow, a figure hidden in the corner, cloaked in dark cloth. Zola's eyes widened in shock. The person was controlling the shadow, using a small carved talisman that glowed faintly with mysterious energy. The figure looked up and smiled, as if expecting her. "So, you finally found me," the person said quietly. "You are stronger than I imagined." Zola's heart raced, but she stood tall. She realized in that moment that she had discovered the truth. The shadow was not just a fearsome force. It was a tool, controlled by someone jealous and secretive, waiting to test her courage. Now, everything depended on what Zola would do next. Zola took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she stared at the mysterious figure controlling the shadow. The talisman in the stranger's hands pulsed with a dim, eerie light. She felt the weight of the moment pressing on her. Her courage, her cleverness, and her heart would determine the outcome. The figure spoke softly, almost teasingly. "You are brave, girl, braver than I expected. But bravery alone will not defeat me." Zola's mind raced. She remembered Baba Kofi's teachings. Courage, wisdom, and belief in oneself were stronger than any dark magic. She studied the talisman carefully, noticing the way the figure manipulated it to make the shadow stretch and move. Then, quietly, she whispered a plan to herself. With steady steps, she moved closer, keeping her eyes on the glowing object. Using her free hand, she grabbed a small stone from the floor and threw it near the talisman. The figure flinched, and the shadow wavered for a moment. Zola realized that the shadow, though powerful, was still connected to the talisman. Gathering all her courage, Zola lunged forward, knocked the talisman from the stranger's hands, and stomped on it with all her strength. The talisman shattered into tiny pieces that glimmered in the moonlight before disappearing completely. Instantly, the shadow dissolved into the air, vanishing as if it had never existed. The figure tried to recover the talisman, but it was gone. Zola stood tall, her heart pounding but filled with triumph. When she returned to the village, the people noticed a change. The fear that had hung over the village disappeared. Children ran to her side, laughing again, and the villagers greeted her with warmth and respect. Zola had faced the mysterious shadow, uncovered its secret, and used her bravery and wisdom to free herself and her village. From that day on, she became a symbol of courage, a girl who had stared into darkness and brought light back to her home.